Welcome to the deep dive. We're so incredibly glad you are here with us today because the journey we are about to go on is frankly mind-bending.
It really is. It's a staggering piece of work to look through.
Yeah. You shared a document with us, and it's this highly esoteric, deeply personal collection of notes and research, and we have spent hours poring over it.
Pouring over every page, really.
Right,
Oh,
because this isn't just a linguistic study.
yeah.
Our mission today is to completely dismantle everything you probably thought you knew about the concept of Yom Kippur. We will be tracking the text as it traces ancient etymology, mythology, and connects Hebrew linguistic roots with Sumerian fertility myths.
And ancient Armenian codes, too.
Exactly. All of this to reveal what the author argues is a unified story about human connection, protection, and sacrifice. And it's largely centered around a single three-letter root, KPR.
To establish our baseline before we jump in, you have to understand how this document approaches language itself. We are looking at a text that treats words not just as simple sounds, but as underlying frequencies. The notes argue these frequencies were encoded long before the civilization of Sumer even existed.
Wow.
It is a synthesis of 40 years of seeking by the author, comparing the Hebrew covenant with the Armenian codex and beyond.
Okay, let's unpack this, starting with the true meaning of the words Yom and Kippur. Because if you are like me, you probably always translated Yom Kippur simply as the Day of Atonement.
Which is the standard understanding, yeah.
But the sources completely redefine these terms. Let us start with Yom. According to your notes, Yom does not just mean a literal 24-hour day. The author argues it actually describes any productive segment.
An upswing in a cyclic phenomenon.
Yes. Think of it as a spiral turning upward. The text beautifully describes it as the 8th mode ascending toward the 9th.
Right, and that specific phrasing is crucial to the document's thesis.
Hold on, let us bring that down to earth for a second. The 8th mode ascending toward the 9th. What does that actually mean for someone just trying to understand how a 24-hour day becomes a cyclic phenomenon?
Well, think about a musical scale. You play 7 notes, and the 8th note is the octave.
Oh, I see.
It is the same note as the first, but at a higher frequency. It represents a completed cycle that immediately launches you into the next higher cycle, the 9th mode. So the text is saying that Yom isn't a flat tick on a clock. It is that upward spiral of completion and renewal.
Is not static at all.
Exactly. And its related word, yomam, which we usually translate as daytime, actually covers any periodic exposure to energy, light, or information.
It shifts the entire paradigm. It goes from a static measurement of time to an active, productive state of being. And then we get to the second half, Kippur.
From the Hebrew verb kapar.
Right. Now, traditionally, you might think of atonement as hiding away or building a fortress of purity to keep the bad stuff out. But the text explains that kapar does not mean building a wall of exclusion.
Not at all.
The author argues it describes forming a protective perimeter around a vulnerable interior. It is a membrane of inclusion.
A membrane of inclusion, it's a fundamental reimagining.
So instead of a brick wall keeping the bad guys out, it's more like what? The text mentions a kazoo. How does a kazoo represent atonement?
It is a brilliant metaphor by the author. Think about how a kazoo works. It has a thin, delicate membrane. When you blow raw human breath into it, the membrane does not block the breath.
It vibrates with it.
Exactly. It translates that raw, unformed energy into music. The document compares this protective membrane to the membrane of a kazoo or to the wings of the cherubim over the Ark of the Covenant.
The text also mentions the apricot wood of the Armenian duduk, right?
Yes, a traditional woodwind instrument shaping and carrying human breath. It is not a rigid wall that blocks things out. It is a flexible boundary that transforms whatever passes through it.
What's fascinating here is how the text tracks this specific root, KPR, echoing across all of ancient history, and it is specifically tied to this idea of a protective boundary.
The geographical connections are incredible.
The notes point out place names all over the ancient world: Capernaum, Caftor, Cyprus. They all share that KPR root, and the author argues they all conceptually revolve around this idea of a protective perimeter holding something precious inside.
And that physical or geographical perimeter soon takes on an entirely different dimension in the text.
Right. We have talked about this protective membrane as a physical space or a musical instrument, but the notes you shared take this a step further into something you wouldn't expect ancient economics. The text introduces the noun koper.
Which is defined here as the price of a human life.
But the author is very careful to clarify that we shouldn't think of that as just a single sum of money handed over in a briefcase.
No, It is described as the purchasing price and the ongoing maintenance cost of keeping someone out of slavery. It is an economic protective layer made up of all sorts of hedges and investments.
And when you make that word plural, you get kippurim.
Yes, and kippurim represents a massive free buying and free keeping of many people all at once. So the argument here is that atonement is not some isolated individual transaction where you clear your own personal ledger.
It is a communal liberation.
Precisely. It is a web of relationships and investments that holds the vulnerable safe.
Here is where it gets really interesting, because the author reveals a massive twist regarding what they playfully call the ransom business. The author points out that in a kidnapping, you rarely see the victim writing the check for their own ransom.
It is a great point.
If you were tied to a chair in a basement, your checkbook is probably out of reach. Someone else has to step up and pay it for you. And that is exactly how the text reframes Yom Kippur. Therefore, the offering brought on Yom Kippur wasn't so much for one's own atonement, but for the others.
It is positioned as the ultimate act of protective love. The source uses this deeply poetic imagery. It is the mineral giving itself to fix the dye for the wool of the other. It is the cypress tree weeping not for itself, but for all who lie beneath its branches.
It is beautiful imagery. And it really hammers home that shift in perspective. Yom Kippur, in this reading, is the day when the protective perimeter is formed around the other. And we see this materialized in the kapar of the mercy seat. Now, if you are tracking with us so far, you'll know the mercy seat is the golden cover of the Ark of the Covenant.
Right, but the text reemphasizes that the cover is not just a lid keeping the contents of the ark trapped inside.
It is a vibrating membrane.
Just like an acacia wood kazoo overlaid with gold, it is the exact place where the divine voice speaks between the wings of the cherubim. It is a point of connection, not a barrier.
A vibrating membrane where the divine voice speaks. It is a staggering way to picture it. But the document does not stop at Hebrew history. It shifts the geography entirely, taking us out to the Mediterranean islands and all the way back to ancient Sumeria. It brings up the Kabiri.
The Kabiris are fascinating. These were the 7 protectors of sailors and the masters of the forge, who worshipped in mystery cults on islands like Cyprus.
And there is that KPR connection again, Kypris.
Exactly. The Kabiris were guardians. They were the ones forming the perimeter for vulnerable sailors on the open ocean. And the text maps this protective concept of KPR perfectly onto the Sumerian jipar, or jiparu.
Let us slow down and set the scene here, because the notes spend a lot of time on this. What exactly is a jipar?
We are going back to the ancient city of Uruk, one of the earliest massive urban centers in Mesopotamia. In the center of Uruk was the Eanna temple complex, and within that complex was the jipar,
Which was the high priestess's residence.
essentially a highly specialized sacred bedroom.
And this wasn't just any bedroom. This was the site of something the text calls the hieros gamos, the sacred marriage ritual. The text details the myth of the union between Inanna and Dumuzi.
Inanna being the powerful goddess of love and war, representing the city itself.
And Dumuzi was a mortal shepherd king who represented the countryside. They would unite in this sacred chamber.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, what is fascinating here is how the author connects this ancient Sumerian ritual to the concept of Yom Kippur. This union took place on an elaborately decorated sacred couch or bed. The author argues that this bed served as a membrane where two opposites, the city and the country, the divine and the mortal, became one.
And they did not do it just for themselves.
Exactly. The entire purpose of the ritual was to ensure fertility and life for the land, the people, and the crops. It is the exact same protective, life-generating perimeter concept as Yom Kippur.
Now, if you are tracking with us so far, you will see why the author makes this next jump, even though it feels wild at first glance. The notes point out this incredible linguistic leap. We have Dumuzi, the mortal shepherd king. The text notes that Dumuzi takes us directly, linguistically, and conceptually to Demoshe.
Meaning Moses.
Right. Connecting a Sumerian fertility god to the biblical Moses is a massive leap. I mean, is the author just relying on the die prefix sounding similar?
It is not just the sound. The author digs deep into the Armenian codex to justify this. In that ancient linguistic tradition, the prefix da means class, order, or measure. It relates to the word dus, or the number 10.
Okay, so how does that connect them?
In the author's framework, Moses is the measure of the covenant. He brings down the law, the 10 Commandments. Dumuzi, on the other hand, is the measure of the cycle, the turning of the seasons, the fertility of the earth.
So they are two sides of the same conceptual coin.
According to the notes, yes. The parallels between Dumuzi and Moses are profound. Both of them are shepherds. Dumisa descends to the underworld and rises again in the cycle of the seasons to ensure life. Moses leads his people through the brutal wilderness, ascends the mountain to bring down the law, and tragically dies just before entering the Promised Land.
Both of them are ultimate mediators. They are standing in the gap between the divine and the people, paying a ransom they themselves do not owe, forming a protective perimeter around their flock.
Together, they span the entire human arc. They take us all the way from the sacred marriage, representing fertility and life, to the sacred law, representing justice and order.
This is incredible.
The author of these notes has essentially attempted to complete a massive historical and spiritual circuit. The text describes it as reunifying Japheth and Shem, bringing the Armenian Codex and the Hebrew Covenant into the exact same chamber.
Tracing this KPR route all the way across the ancient world.
From the Egyptian scarab rolling the sun to bring the dawn, to the kabiri protecting sailors, to the gipar bed of becoming in Uruk, to the ark's mercy seat vibrating with the divine voice, all the way to Yom Kippur, it is the vertical line of the spirit meeting the horizontal bed of becoming.
You can really feel the emotional resonance dripping from the source notes at this point. It's the culmination of 40 years of seeking. The text mentions this deeply personal imagery of tears being like the water of the Avazan spring flowing.
A vessel filling up over 4 decades.
Exactly. It talks about honoring a mother's truth, carried in the blood. It mentions using a wife's kazoo to literally blow open millennia of entrenched academic scholarship.
It is incredibly moving. The notes say the tears are the seal of a completed vessel. When the vessel can hold no more, it overflows, and the becoming is finally ready to pour out.
So what does this all mean? Why should you, listening to this deep dive right now, care about Sumerian beds or ancient Armenian prefixes?
It is the crucial question.
The notes offer a profound reminder of the value of seeing human history not as isolated silos, not as separate religions or disconnected ancient myths, but as a single shared membrane of breath and protection. The author is telling us that beneath our different languages, there is a shared song of protective love.
It is the realization that true atonement, true protection, is the ransom paid by the one for the all. It is the mineral fixing the dye for the wool of the other.
This raises an important question for all of us about how we view our own protective perimeters today. Look at the boundaries you set up in your own life, your own communities. Are they walls of exclusion meant to keep the outside world at bay? Or are they membranes of inclusion like the apricot wood of the duduk, or the mercy seat, meant to translate breath into music?
Meant to protect the vulnerable while still allowing the divine voice to vibrate through.
That is the perfect question to carry with you. And to leave you with one final striking image to mull over on your own, there is something from the very end of the source material that we haven't touched on yet. The text describes a vision of the four-poster bed with a corona.
It is a very dense symbolic image to end on.
It is, and the author calls it squaring the circle. I want you to imagine a bed with 4 posts. According to the text, those posts represent the 4 directions of the compass, the 4 rivers of Eden, and the 4 letters of the tetragrammaton.
The ancient, unspeakable 4-letter name of God.
Yes. They represent the 4 corners of the ark, the 4 evangelists, and the 4 elements: mineral, vegetable, animal, and divine.
It is the ultimate grounding of the physical and spiritual world.
Exactly. And atop this incredible structure sits the corona, the crown. The notes describe this crown as the Ouroboros, the ancient symbol of a snake eating its own tail, representing eternity and the endless cycle of life. It is the ring of light, the 9th heaven crowning the 8 modes we talked about earlier.
The bed itself is the horizontal place of becoming, but the crown is the vertical place of being.
The infinite made finite, the wave crystallized, the circle squared. We leave you to explore how you might make the infinite finite in the sacred spaces you create in your own life. Thank you for taking this deep dive with us.